Hi everyone, welcome to Reconstruction. This is Mrs. Tevis-Finn recording from room 114. So on your guided notes it should say the three plans, the Radical Republicans, and the amendments. So I'd like to open up with this political cartoon up there on the left and also the map. So I want to ask some questions. How are we going to come together as a country? How do we deal with the freed slaves and their rights? And do we punish the South? So I'm going to ask you guys in your groups, what do you see in the political cartoon there up there on the left? So it's important. I chose it for a reason. What do you think's going on? And this map, guys, shows the southern states and when they were readmitted to the Union. So this is a huge issue for us to deal with. And so under number 1, in Lincoln's own Republican Party, you guys want to note that a group emerged that did not want to reconcile with the South. I gave you their names. It was led by Charles Sumner on the left and Thaddeus Stevens on the right. Their main agenda was to, quote, revolutionize the South. So I want you guys to also note their 3 goals. So under 3 goals, put down the first one is to prevent the leaders of the Confederacy from coming back to power. 2, they wanted their own party to become a powerful institution in the South. And 3, they wanted the federal government to help African Americans vote. This political cartoon we're going to also discuss in our groups and look at the symbolism and the idealism. For number 2, guys, an important issue is the 3/5 compromise. So this goes back to your US 1 days, but I want you to know what it was. So here's a great review cartoon to help you, but please put down that what it did is it counted only 3/5 of the slaves towards population and taxes. And you guys should note on these 2 issues for both this side and this side, from the North versus the South, that the issue is representation in Congress. So now that the slaves are free, the South is entitled to 15 more seats in the House. And so what this means, everyone, is the black vote can now make a huge difference. And on to number 3, I just have a question. Could the Republican Party keep control of Congress? Now that slaves count for equal population and then representation. So it's important. They're going to really go after the black votes. You can put down they will need black votes. And it's important to review that many Republicans had been abolitionists before the war. I showed you guys, here's a picture, Am I Not a Man and a Brother, from the abolitionist campaigns. They believed in, put down, political equality regardless of race. So I'm introducing to you guys a new group. They're going to have a different plan. So remember, Lincoln's plan was 10%. The Republicans are going to be pretty radical, and the moderates. So for number 4, put down in the middle were the moderates, believing Lincoln's plan was too lenient and the radical Republicans were too far on the African American side. So they introduced, put down the Wade-Davis bill in Congress. And it required, guys, the majority of adult white males to take an oath of loyalty, and also each state could hold a constitutional convention. They would have to abolish slavery and reject all debts from the Civil War. It also deprived Confederate officials the right to vote and hold office. And I chose over here on the right an actual photo showing the draft of this bill. And so I think it's kind of neat to see the rough draft and how they're trying to figure things out. And to sum this movement, Lincoln vetoed it. He blocked the bill, believing a harsh peace would be counterproductive. Remember, his main goal was unity. He is known to have said, quote, no persecution, no bloody work. So fill that quote in. He didn't want to make things worse in the South. It's important to note that in a speech right before his assassination, he hints at blacks getting the right to vote, and there were huge riots. So I want to point out that his assassination drastically changes Reconstruction. So I have the sketch up there on the right at Ford's Theater. And what is drastic as well is that his vice president was Andrew Johnson. So put his name down. He was a Southern Democrat. So this could be very divisive, but during the Civil War, he actually was a hero to the North. Filled in because his own state, Tennessee, seceded, and he didn't follow. He remained loyal to the North and refused to give up his seat. So it won him some loyalty. His plan was called, I'm on number 5, the Restoration Program. He offered to pardon all citizens. They had to return their property, and he also excluded officials and officers from the Confederacy. Remember the importance of the images I choose. Here's a photo of a beautiful plantation. And so I want you guys to note, he especially went after the planter elite, believing they had caused the Civil War. He made them apply for individual pardons, especially those who had $20,000 or more in valued property. So that's his target. He also issued a proclamation for North Carolina. It became a model for future states, and so what it said was to rejoin the Union, each former Confederate state had to have a constitutional convention, revoke their ordinance of secession, ratify the 13th Amendment, and reject all debts. So I'd like to ask you this question, number 6. What would happen if former members of the Confederacy were elected to Congress, during Reconstruction? Well, here he is here on the right. He's a little scary looking. Radical Republicans were shocked and outraged when former Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, fill in his name, he was reelected. So they voted to reject all new Southern members of Congress. So there is not unity. There is discord and chaos. And so moving on to number 7, I open up with this photograph. And so these kids, I want you to really look at their faces, look at the quality of their life. And so, in your groups, you'll kind of talk about your reaction and also why you think I chose this picture. So here's a gang of workers. They're definitely all shackled. You can't really see that, but this kind of gives us a flavor of what's going on in the South. So number 7, guys, as Southern states began setting up their own governments, they passed a series of laws known as the Black Codes, which drastically limited African Americans' rights. So what they did is they required blacks to enter into annual labor contracts. So that just kind of means that their work was heavily supervised. They were forced to accept apprenticeships in certain states, and some could be even beaten or whipped while working there. And just to review, guys, an apprenticeship was, learning a trade, so it was kind of similar to servant and master. Several states required African Americans to set specific work hours and also to get licenses to work in non-agricultural jobs. So basically, guys, anything off the farm, like a skilled trade, kind of alerted the whites of possible threats and made them apply for permission to have these jobs. The Black Codes infuriated the North. They really felt like their country was moving backwards. And so I want to show you a few examples of the Black Codes in Mississippi and in Louisiana. So these were passed by former Confederate states. And so in our groups, guys, I want you to think about what is the purpose of these Black Codes. Number 8, Black Codes and the election of former Confederate leaders to Congress convinced many moderates to join the radicals. And so now with this larger group, they decided to start their own plan for Reconstruction. And they pass a Civil Rights Act. And so for number 9, guys, the Civil Rights Act granted citizenship to all persons born in the U.S., except Native Americans. It allowed African Americans to own property and be treated equally in the courts. Number 10, the Supreme Court still held former slave owners, so the radicals worried that they would overturn the Civil Rights Act. And so the Republicans introduced the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed the rights of citizenship. So look at the wording there. Things like due process and fair trial. So this is the, giving you guys the explanation for the 14th Amendment. So there is support for the 14th Amendment because such things as this. So under 11, there is increasing violence. In Memphis, Tennessee, There was an incident in May of 1866 where a white mob killed 46 African Americans and burned their homes, schools, and churches. This convinced the moderates to support the 14th Amendment. For number 12, I just want you guys to know, where President Johnson stands. He is against the 14th Amendment. He attacks it. He's against the radicals. He pushes for his own plan. So, 13. In March 1867, Congress passes the Military Reconstruction Act. So fill that in. Dividing up the former Confederacy, not Tennessee, because it had ratified the 14th Amendment, into 5 military districts, with a Union general in each one to oversee. And so with the military supervising voting, 6 former Confederate states are readmitted to the Union because they met the requirements. So for bonus, I want you guys to know some of those states: North and South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, and Arkansas. So basically those were the states that had the military babysitting them, and so protecting blacks to vote without violence. So there's a lot of resentment with the military down in the South. So now it's really Johnson versus the Republicans. And the Republicans want to use the Secretary of War, Ed Stanton, to be on their side. So 14, guys, they want to prevent Johnson from going above them or around them. So they pass 2 things, guys. Fill out the Command of the Army Act and the Office of Tenure Act. What these 2 things do is they require Johnson to go through the War Department and Stanton, to go with his plans for Reconstruction. So Johnson fights back. He fires Stanton, and he barricades himself in his office for 3 days. Congress votes to impeach Johnson, and was really only 1 vote short. I have here a copy of the impeachment ticket that people would receive to go to the hearing. But basically, they didn't want to set a dangerous precedent, to impeach, just because the president disagreed with Congress. So he is not impeached, but 15, guys, put down Johnson finishes his term quietly. And the Republicans nominate General Ulysses S. Grant. You should remember him from the head of the Northern Army. Grant definitely provides that leadership the country needs. There is ongoing violence, you guys can fill that in, which convinced many Northerners that the South really could not be trusted. So the presence of the military allowed African Americans to vote, which resulted in 6 Southern states actually voting for Grant, former Union general. So that's huge. So the Republicans retain control of the House. So lastly, guys, number 16. The Republicans then pass the 15th Amendment because they had a majority in Congress and a trusted new president. This is a revolutionary amendment, for they really do need the blacks to vote to keep their party strong. Lincoln had already hinted at it, but it's a huge change for our country to allow blacks now this constitutional right. And so to summarize, we talked about, the different plans for Reconstruction, who the radicals were, who the moderates were, Lincoln versus Johnson, and now we have Grant. So, and I also want you to know the importance of the amendments. This is Mrs. Tevis-Finn signing off. Have a great day.